All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland, and our guest is Samuel Hofman. Samuel, how are you doing?
I'm enjoying the nice, lovely, thick, sticky, snowball, wonderful weather, snow that we're having. It went outside today, and I had about 1.5 foot of this really wonderful packs, stuff you can make snowmen out of on my car. So it's nice outside. It's pretty.
That's common
December
for you
1st.
this time of year, I assume?
Yeah, here we are at December 1st already, and and then you guys had the snowstorm, or not you guys, but the East Coast had the snowstorm. Did you guys get much, or are you snow covered yet, or?
We are waiting on it. We are sitting here hoping to get some.
When I lived in Eugene, most of the winter all we saw was rain. So.
Oh right, yeah.
It melts off. Warm Pacific water and all of that. And of course, I just looked at the jet stream this morning, and it's doing some really funky stuff. And it's finally in the winter jet instead of the Arctic jet that was going on all last week and everything with the lake effect snow and everything. But there's a whole bunch of really crazy low pressure systems all over, and it's just very odd. The number and the count is way up from what it ever used to be. We're not in Kansas anymore. Our climate is definitely changing, and drastically.
Well, is that... We always bring this up, like, how much of that is man-made and how much of that is out of our hands, but as things progress, I guess we need to address that each time.
Well, if you look at the CO2 level records, where they discuss ice age and or nuclear winter due to volcanic output of ash in our atmosphere and everything else, from what I can find, now of course I haven't looked into this with too extreme a depth of information, but from what I can find, that the Earth's CO2 levels are not really high enough in comparison to some of these prior major catastrophe events that occurred, like, for instance, 1850 was the year that we had no summer. And there are other events like that where they compare the CO2 levels and everything and ash and everything in comparison. And so I still don't believe climate change is occurring on Earth from mostly mankind. I drastically still believe that this climate change is brought by the second star, binary solar system, two sets of planets, two suns. And, with the proximity of this larger star behind our star, if that's exactly where it is, it could be beside it or in front of it. But as far as we can tell, they're still co-linked. And if you have a larger star, you're going to elevate the temperature. Now, we also know that for a fact that all the planets, all the normal planets are elevating in temperature, too. So that throws man's, it's climate change from car exhaust and airplane exhaust right out the window. Just, how do you account for all the other planets all heating up at the same time starting, and then, of course, when the second star got here, with all the normal planets tipped their axis in a deep, hard left tip. And that has, of course, been shown by NASA over the years, too, but people don't put the puzzle pieces together.
Well, now mainstream scientists would have us believe that CO2 levels are higher than they've ever been, and they're on the rise. Why are we seeing that different here?
Well, they're of course rising. I just don't think that we're at catastrophic fail levels. I'm sure that there is a great deal of man's greenhouse gas effect occurring, but I don't think it's to the point where we're, because I hear talk about people say, well, in about 4 or 5 years, we're going to go into this ice age. And, and of course, there's just so much rumor and so many different actual scientists that can't even agree on it. So I can understand where, rumors and YouTubers and Facebookers don't agree on the source of information as well. It's really hard to pin certain things down because in most cases throughout, a system of a circle, there's many links to the process of what actually affects everything, because everything's connected. So, I don't think we can actually just pin it down on car exhaust only, but I do think that I truly believe that for an example, the wintering over of plants in Montana, which has never occurred, and I've had vegetables that actually lived through the snow, and you can see the sun shining on them. And there's snow on the ground, and yet these things are still alive. And that never, ever occurred here before, and that's been going on for many years up here. So, if you look in films and stuff and commercials and TV and you see people driving down the road and this massive, massive bright star, our sun has never been that big. And it's not closer to us. We just have a larger star here that I don't think people take into account. And I mean, I even myself am chiding myself constantly trying to say, is this real? Because it is so hard for us to, reach into and grab and say, okay, things are not the way we perceive them as what they used to be. And then how do you draw the line where, you don't come off as a conspiracy nut job and yet still try to share the information that you gathered and surmised. Now, we did watch that big red blob come in 2010, 2009, and 2008, and had we not seen that, I wouldn't be as prominently in the belief pattern that we have 2 stars, but we have to. And this, of course, is what my 1978 paper was all about, that we had to have 2 stars and 2 planetary groups, which is why I got the attention I got.
Now, let me stick with the climate just for a few more questions. So one concern that scientists are always putting on us because of the climate is the point of no return. The point that there's so much carbon in our atmosphere that it wouldn't really matter what we could do to stop it. Is that something that you are still concerned about? The point?
I believe that we have already passed a certain threshold of some sort, because we are, of course, seeing the Mississippi dried up this year, the Yangtze dried up this year, the Rhine, the Danube, all the major rivers around the planet last year and this year have dried up. And regardless of the rainfall that we get in the coming next year, this has already taken a chunk out of the circle that I spoke of earlier. Once you start messing with the way things work, even at ground level water, where you rob groundwater from a few miles away from here by pulling water and pumping it there, because the great example of that is where the Russians made an entire inland sea just vanish, or I think it was fresh water. But they irrigated other regions by interrupting the amount that went and filled in that infill lake year after year, and now it is not even there anymore, and that's over right next to the Black Sea, and you can look that up. Anytime we have a change, for instance, another example is that the Colorado River doesn't even meet the Salton Sea anymore, and it dries up miles and miles and miles before it even gets to where it used to. And that, of course, has drastically changed the entire region. And if you look at people who live in the Salton Sea, well, their property values have gone down the toilet, period, because they're literally living next to a garbage pool full of salt that just stinks to all high heaven because it doesn't get any new fresh water anymore.
Yeah, I used to drive by the Great Salt Lake on a regular basis. It did not smell good.
The Salt Lake is drying up horrendously bad as well, and there's major studies going on about that in Salt Lake in Utah, and it's catastrophically already stepped past the point of no return.
Do you think any of this has to do with extra population, the size of our population? We just recently, it was reported past 8 billion on the planet. Or what's it, 7 billion? I don't remember.
Right. No, it was 8 billion, and that was like a month ago.
Right.
I'm not going to stand there and say, oh, they're out to get us. But I am sure that there is some, shall we say, lessening in concern for the populace, because due to our climate and our population count. And yes, it seems to me like the death of many people no longer is as important as it seemed to be. But then, of course, world leaders aren't always good world leaders. And, do we have greed and are we one-sided, and do the poor even exist? And in a lot of cases, with the poor of the list of the minorities that have been used as fodder and fear to get and keep power, and we'll talk about the Republican Party, how they basically use fear to get people on board. And that's I wish we weren't living like that right now. I really wish we weren't.
Yeah, earlier you made some comment about trying not to come across as a nut job, and I was thinking to myself that The easiest way to not come across as a nut job is to just not be mean when you're talking about stuff.
Yeah, well, frankly, anytime I even discuss the planets with people, they look at me like I am so out there. And I wouldn't be standing here, we're working on our 13th year now. I wouldn't be standing here on my 13th year going, well, here's this picture of this planet and here's this picture of this planet, if they didn't match over and over and over and over and over again. And what really kills me is that people don't even see the light issue. I do not know how everybody is missing that the light is really messed up, and they accept it as normal. And it's like, don't you see that? And everybody goes, what? And you see these refractions off the side of the sun and the cutoffs of the sun, and the sun is square, and the sun is this little sliver of what it's supposed to be. And yet everybody thinks, oh, it's just clouds. No, it's a planet, that's cutting into the side of our view. And if you look over to the left, you got dark, shadowy area, and then you look in front of you, and it's bright and intense. And then you look over to the right, and you see dark, shadowy going off everywhere else. And everybody says, oh, it's just a storm coming. Well, no, excuse me. But, these same pictures are occurring around the world all at the same time. And we have a light pinch going on, and people just don't get that because we're seeing the dark side of these planets that are coming in front of the sun. And so they barely show any difference. But you have to take a minute, dark gray-black sunglasses. Don't directly look at the sun, of course. But then I tell everybody in all the captures, in your pictures, look at the dark areas first. Look at the angle of the light cutoff. Look at the angles of light that is shining down for this reason or that reason, or if it has an orange halo on one side of it turning to brown, well, that's debris and or a planet. And people don't understand the light issues. And I had questions today, well, why can't we see it here in New Zealand while you guys are watching it in England or the USA and everything? And I said, they move. And we usually see these planets at certain times of the day when the light angles off the sides of them, either at sunrise, sunset, middle of the day, and that's your best times to shoot for if you want to go outside. And then look to the south, and then, of course, nowadays you have to look up and down and north and east and west because we're actually inside the group of planets. They're around us at all times. And how close they are in our personal atmosphere is how well we see them, of course, at the side angle illumination, because they are between us and the sun, and so therefore we're seeing the dark side of the planets till they pass Earth. Now, currently, Uri and Nepesity and Atu are going over the top of us, and at certain parts of the day, morning and sunrise, and at night, they're illuminating and showing up, and you can see sometimes at night the bottoms of these planets that are now overhead and past Earth, which they've never been this close and this far above us before. And you can now see them at night in certain occasions. And we've had, of course, far more captures and submissions recently than we did before. But everybody said, well, how come we can't see them at night? But they are visible if you know what you're looking for.
For new users and new people, why don't you explain to us just a quick rundown on what these planets are that you're talking about? Okay. Unfortunately, it's something we have to cover each time because you never know.
Right. Well, Nibiru is a large water-type planet. It has, from pictures that we have received over the years, it has land masses much like Earth, and of course, very high mountain ranges, and it's just this big, huge planet. It has a fingery base cloud that looks like it's sitting in the palm of someone's spread out fingers. Sarru is a greenish blue because it has less deep oceans. It's slightly smaller. It's a water-type planet also. Earth is a rock type and much smaller. Then there's two gas giants. Uri is the massive big one, and it's striped gray and has little edges that you can see inside of its atmosphere in between some of its middle rings. Atu is a purple gas giant, and it's got angled side projecting almost like a 40-degree angle stripes on it, and it has a very large white moon that, of course, has dots and dots and dots all over it from asteroids, collisions, etc., like moons, which is why we know it's a moon. And then, of course, there's numerous amounts of asteroid groups that exist in their debris field around gas giants is usually a debris field. Now, smaller is Saturn, I believe is maybe it's a red planet, and it has, we think, 3 moons, but its main yellow moon is the one that leaves the drag-off ion tail around it, which is everybody calls the winged planet, which is a misnomer of information, because Nibiru is not red, it's blue, and Saturn is the red planet and the winged planet. But anyway, so I believe Saturn to be a little bit larger than Earth, and then there's green opacity, and it's sort of like we think it's volcanic and maybe copper or something like this, because it's all these little literal volcanic protrusions that do also affect its atmosphere when it goes by, and we've seen evidence of that. And then, of course, there's the one that I rarely mention, which is Matim. And Matim is this tiny little, I believe it's Cirrus or Cestus or make size, or maybe Earth size, I don't know. But it's bright blue, and we have not seen her in quite a few years because she, I believe, I'm not completely sure about this, but I believe she orbits around Sarru and then all the way out to Uri and then back around Sarru, and that's a longer path, and I believe it's a separate orbit, completely different than the rest of the bodies. Now, they spiral tighter together, and they're the inner solar system, and we are the outer connective solar system, and that's why we spiral way farther away, planet mass-wise, etc., and that's why our gas giants are in the middle, because they're all connected somehow electrically to this atomic structure that we call the compound of our binary solar system. We're not just one atom with a bunch of stuff on it. We're 2 atoms that are connected and joined, and that's how they travel. And then then of course, then there's Immaru, which is a massive gas giant that holds, I believe, the 2 stars and the 2 sets of planets, and that is an unlit star. Gas giants become stars once their inner pressure gets so massive, the mass level gets to where it starts an atomic reaction. And science doesn't really appreciate that gas giants become stars yet, although it is a pretty accepted application. So every 3,654 years, Nibiru means the planet of crossing, and when we say crossing, it's crossing right in our faces. Now, I originally was, thinking, oh, we want to see this little dot over here, and there will be that planet, and there that, and that's not what's going on. It's literally going, spiraling right up before us, and every day we see the planets come in, and they do this weird rotational thing, and then they're illuminated here, and then they're hard to see, and then they're illuminated again when they move. And we've seen enough evidence that we absolutely know that we're not full of it here, and we've had so many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of captures that there's become, of course, this huge group of people that see them every day now, and we're talking thousands and thousands of people around the world.
So you said that these planets are closer to us than they have been in any of our memories. Of course, right. They've been this close before, but from what you're saying, but what does the proximity mean for us?
Well, you may have noticed that Kilauea, the volcano, was going off, and Mount Etna is, of course, spewing lava, and even though it's covered by snow, we're seeing a lot of activity.
We're seeing. I was out of touch, but I did catch the Hawaiian.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 going off on Hawaii, and there's even an undersea one to the southeast of Hawaii, the Big Island, I believe, and it's underwater, and that, of course, was shared by scientists and suspicious observer, etc. And so and there are, of course, rumors, and we talked about this before. The rumors are that 2023 is going to be a very geological active time period, and it would make sense now that the planets are spiraling close. They were farther. They came up from below Earth, and we started to see in 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011 from Antarctica webcams, etc. And then, of course, we documented and watched until they were visible in the northern hemisphere. Now, they've rotated in many cycles, a yearly cycle, in front of us, where they went from the right to the left to the right, and then they got bigger and right and left, and they started out in a spiral way long ago in 2008. You could see this little spiral coming, but then they went right to left to right to left to right to left, and now in 2018, 2019, Uri and Atu and other planets were on the right-hand side, and then about 2019 they crossed over, which is that right to left as we view them coming up and up and up and up. And they were doing their spiral or orbital rotation in front of us. But now, as of roughly 2020, 2019, 2020, they started going past us, and that's where we started seeing the illuminations of Uri and Atu, and we could see the purple planet, and we got to see the stripes of Uri and the asteroid groups below her, and now they're poking up out of their atmosphere and doing all this cool stuff. And of course, we've documented the entire time as they got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And now they're so huge, they're sky-filling. By the way, I sent you a couple of little videos on PM that I'd like you to view. And one's coming from Rebecca at Nibiru Followers Anonymous, and she's doing a phenomenal job, and she's putting up together stuff that I don't even have time to do, nor the skills to do, and she's doing a fantastic job. And she's doing a lot of TikTok. And now if you want to look up some of that stuff, go to YouTube and look up Nibiru Followers Anonymous, and Jesus is putting out tons of great stuff. One of the videos I sent you is probably the last one I sent you in PM, and he's been getting some phenomenal captures from the desert. And it's kind of hard for people on the coastlines, like West Coast, East Coast, at sea level to see as well as we do up here. Now Jesus is a little higher, and I don't know what their altitude is, but he's getting phenomenal captures. That it's just, I sit there and I'm in awe still. Everything he posts lately is just wonderful. And then of course we've got Petty in Hungary, and he's capturing some nonstop, really wonderful. And these people have learned. They've actually learned what to look for and how to identify it, and they know what to capture, and how to draw out pictures and do close-ups and stuff. And this is, of course, a process that the older members have taken a decade to learn how to do this stuff. So they're doing phenomenal work, and it's really difficult to walk up to a stranger on the street and say, "Hey, this is what's happening," and then show them stuff because they're in the middle of the show. They're not, we're on chapter 3, and they have to start at the beginning credits just to understand what's going on. So it's really difficult on new people to try and catch up and believe. And now, literally, we're not trying to jam this down their throat, but we don't have speculation. We have proof. And this, of course, like I said, we're going on our 13th year. So otherwise, I wouldn't be standing here doing radio shows, because I would think I was nuts. This is absolutely crazy that we have a second set of planets and there's people on them. And then, speaking of which, we could also discuss the Texas Cube and the Longbox Cube and the Empire Orb and all the ships that we keep sighting every day around the world. And I was under a semi-normal human assumption that by now this should have gone viral. And yet, because it's a topic that people are so unsure of, and it fears them, or they're skeptical or whatever, and I don't want to come off sounding like a nut job, they're here. They are so unbelievable, and it's every day. Every day I get sightings from around the world of the Texas Cube and their smaller craft, and the Longbox Cube and the Space Tube, and we're currently sighting the Skull asteroid again phenomenally. It's kind of spooky, but it's up there. And there's just so much. I'm in absolute awe and amazement that it's not being shared by NASA in certain ways, or by some scientists. But them, of course, they don't want to lose their paycheck, so they're not going to stick their nards on the chopping block for this.
Yeah, speaking of which, not to discredit any of the efforts that anybody put in, but are there any, for lack of a better word, mainstream, credible scientists that have come over to this?
Wow, they touch on little pieces. They'll scratch the surface and drop a little hint or two, but they of course are not putting connecting the dots. Now, Mr. BBB 333, he does a lot of really good captures, but he doesn't have the premise to put A puzzle piece, B puzzle piece, and C puzzle piece to get this whole picture. And he, of course, unfortunately, like many people out there, they debate about one sighting, whereas we take 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 sightings, and then we discuss stuff, and we do transitions between sister sites, and they'll grab stuff, and I grab, I'll go to their site, and they'll come to mine, and then we trade information, and then we correlate it. So it's so, if you know, even I know that the Roman Catholic Church has got their telescope, and I know that NASA released a thing just even yesterday, and I of course didn't go into too much reading of it. I skimmed it over real fast because it's old information, and they're saying, you know, that the Vatican and NASA are in communication with Nibiru, and that was actually a federal post yesterday. So, and of course, they're giving a basic information, and it's all old information, and therefore you're not going to attach and say, oh, it's right there in front of me. They're giving you information, and they're just giving you a sliver off of the iceberg.
You know, aliens being in contact with our government, or with the governments of the world, makes sense. But why would they be in contact with the Catholic Church?
Gold.
And then also, I'm sure that they're in contact with other churches.
Well, you'd have to put yourself in their shoes, say, whom do I want to talk to, and if I want to talk to someone, because, you know, we are lowercase animals. I would imagine that one or two of the higher Federation groups of beings wish to promote a certain amount of us forward, and then there's other ones that don't care, and then there's other factions that probably see us as more of a commodity and a workforce and just dumb animals. So, but you can never attribute one factional outcome or willingness by one faction, because there are so many. So, and of course, it's all factional agenda for everyone here on Earth to retain power and get money and blah blah blah. And so they're working together, and I believe that the arrival of the Empire Orb, or through the Norway Spiral, being that the G7 countries leaders were in Germany at the time for that summit in, I believe that was, what's the Norway Spiral? I think that was 2009. And I believe that was a show of force where they, you know, say, here, look, you know, the Empire flagship is showing up in here, and you guys have to give us the gold because our technology, blah, 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 it outranks yours tenfold, and if you don't listen to us, we'll invade. And so I'm sure they're attempting to. Now, they don't need to invade because they already own Earth, and I've talked about that in previous shows. And that bothers a lot of people, and I'm sorry, but it's pretty much, you know, we've been owned for 300,000 years in basic. I mean, and that's just this regime change. So there's a lot of factions doing a lot of things.
Sorry, and to better explain this, when you say that we're owned by the collection of factions, not by an individual faction.
Right, I believe it's a federation, and we, of course, are a very strong commodity resource mining planet. We're this tiny little rock planet where the workers are here doing what they're supposed to do, and every 3,654 years, when the planet of passing is close enough, they come down in large ships or container ships or whatever, and if I don't know if they have beaming technology or whatever, but I imagine the gold has to be moved by hand, and that takes many years. And people are always asking me how long is the Nibiru cycle, and I believe it's about a 25 year cycle. It may be more. But I doubt it. If we think we're already past halfway, but I mean, you know, give or take. The commodities is the reason the planet is owned, and the reason that we're here is because of the commodities. Otherwise, there would be, I would say, less evolved humanoids on the planet.
So when we're thinking about them coming for gold, I just had the thought that, you know, there's them. And then there's us. Are all of their factions from this other?
Well, you can take into account Nibiru and Sarru. I believe that, and I think that's a local planetary faction. And I believe that the Federation has a larger status and has taken the local faction under its collective wing. So, and that's, of course, just the general Federation. Now, there are other races out there, and there's even a bug war going on, which has been going on for God only knows how long, And I, of course, don't have current information of that, but I was told over 40 years ago that was the case.
But by out there, I guess what I'm wondering is, do you mean out there beyond our binary solar system?
Oh yeah, there's thousands of races out there, and I believe the Federation is a large area of our solar or our universe, and a collective group of planets within, a few light years of us, or 10, 20, or 30 light years of us, or however they're able to travel great distances. Of course, I believe, like many people, that there are opening wormhole abilities between planets and solar systems. I don't fully understand the technology, but I believe that they do jump. And I know that they can time travel because I was shown that. So, there's multiple factions beyond even the Federation here, and this is like 7 or 8 or 12 races grouped up and all trying to stifle and limit some incursion of other races into our part of the solar system, stealing our commodities, because it all boils down to supply and demand of what you need to live. And this, Earth is a factory planet.
So I guess where I was going with all this is, so that means that there are other factory planets out there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I believe that we might not even be, I think we might even be a patented product that has been distributed elsewhere as well. Humans, for instance, humanoids.
Oh, right.
I believe that there are millions of factions out there and millions of races, and because space is so vast, and everybody always thinks that the Big Bang was just this one occasion and everything came out of that. I don't for a second believe that universes are the same age. I think there's multiple ages from multiple universes. And we know also there's other dimensions. So, there's no putting time to this, and the fact that many of these races are millions of years ahead of us. So, and then their technology is staggering because I've seen it and I watched it and I saw it in some cases, and it's just like, wow, how do you do that? And to them, it's just basic. It's like us grabbing a book of matches and lighting a match.
Right. Going back to something you said earlier, very off topic, but you were talking about the base clouds as the planet comes close to us, and that Nibiru had sort of like finger-like base clouds that sort of resembled a hand coming up around the bottom.
Right.
What I'm wondering is, are the base clouds our planet coming close to their planet, or are the base clouds something that does Earth have base?
Look at it like an open pole. Nepacity has an open pole, and so does Sarru. Sarru has a very thick base cloud, and it illuminates brightly, but then it's massive compared to the other little planets. And you can actually see the little planets almost inside the massive opening of Sarru.
By open pole, you mean like no magnetic field there, or?
Yeah, you're right. That like their magnetic field has a stronger, wider magnetic shaft from its pole value, from its put off and off put, however you want to state it. And we've even seen evidence of ion bleed off, electron acceleration. We talked about the superhighway between the planets when a close pass happens, and all of a sudden our street lights and everything goes straight up into the sky. And that's accelerated ions that are taking a pathway of traveling bleed off between bodies. And we've seen evidence of that in auroras, in space bodies between one body and another, where it puts off this weird illuminated aurora when you go, oh, hey, that's a planet, and oh, that's a planet. And of course, it was written off by modern science as just an aurora borealis. But then if you start looking at the dark areas first and stuff, you'll start to see these big, full, dark body circles. And that doesn't occur without actually having a dark body that's actually a round planet standing there. And of course, you have to spend hundreds of hours looking for something, but occasionally you do see something that is absolutely undeniable. That, oh my God, that's a dark body standing there. How could people not see that? And there's numerous effects, illuminations, transfers of electricity and energy. I saw a video today where people are standing on top of this mountaintop, and they've got all of these ions that are purple. coming off their fingertips as they reach their hand up in the air. And of course, that happens up on top of the pyramid as well. You become electrically charged, and this is why you don't stand below a helicopter and touch it while its rotors are spinning, because it gathers static and all this, and you get shocked. You get electrocuted. So the electrical dispersal between these bodies, the planets have 4,000 mile atmospheres. Earth is like, by the time it gets all the way up to its end of its ionosphere, it's somewhere around 3,000 some odd miles. And of course, our actual cloud atmosphere only goes up to the storm pattern atmosphere runs 18 to 20,000 feet, and then 25,000 feet you have another level of thinner clouds and the cirrus and all of this, and then you go up even higher, and then of course you get the ozone layer and oxygen 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and all of this. Where water and air, I've always believed, are one and the same. You have air is thin water, and water is thick air, and that's why if you go to the bottom of the ocean, they have heavy water. And it's all just a variant grade of the gaseous parts of themselves. Now, that same thing, those grades of gaseous atmospheres around Earth and around the passing planets, when they muddle into each other, because they repel, they don't crash into each other, and they pass by and shove, the little kid out of the way. And these patterns and illuminations is what creates a cloud base that we have noticed and watched form, and each one of the major planets has their own specific type of behavior that has been repeated year after year after year, and we can see it time after time after time, including, I've gotten to the point where I can draw them just from memory, because we've seen it for so long now that I don't even need to look, I just draw it. So the patterns are reoccurring, and we've watched them, of course, for 12 years, and people ask about that, and well, how come you're in a plane, and how come we don't see it? And I'm going, well, if you look above, and you're in a plane, and you're above the clouds, and you see the cumulus nimbus below you, you're at the top of our atmosphere for clouds, with give or take some of the thinner cirrus clouds, which is where they fly 35,000 feet. And if you see a cloud bank above you when you're above the clouds in an airplane, those clouds are not in our atmosphere. They're out there in space, and people don't get that. And they go, oh, look, it's all these clouds out there. Yeah, well, you're looking at a planet who has an atmosphere. And if it happens to be Uri, well, then you're going to see a whole bunch of weird bubbly clouds, because it has a bubbly cloud base with a base cloud of asteroid debris below it, and then some minor moon objects within its lower hemispheres, and then you can see the stripes, and you can see the variations in the side of it, shining from the right-hand side, the sun shining on the left-hand face, and we get pictures of it every day. And we get the dark pictures, and where they show this dark body that stands there, and then we get actual side illuminations, and then we get other illuminations where you literally see all the asteroids that are orbiting underneath her, and that varies in cloud type as well. Sometimes they're wrapped deep in clouds, and other times they're plainly visible and breaking free. So we've watched this for so long that it's actually proven its own information.
So how much of the private space exploration do you think is motivated by this closeness that you're saying?
Oh, I'm imagining. Could you imagine the benefits of if you were above the standard people, a millionaire, billionaire, whatever, and you had the opportunity to connect with ET and do a little bit of trade and maybe a little technology swapping, and hey, I'll be available to help you with this if you help me with that, and give and take, which is what makes the world go round. I think it would be amazing. I think it would be immense. I think that if you are excruciatingly rich, you have a greater lever of leverage that they can get under your lid and affect you. So I think it's entirely possible a lot of people could be driven specifically by greed and hell with the human race. There are money that's about to disappear, and they don't want that.
I guess that could be put into the question of, does that mean that William Shatner knows? Because he went up there.
Well, yeah, but would you hand that to him?
Yeah, but
With his psyche, with Bill Shatner's psyche val, do you think if you were a higher ranking official, you would hand that information?
No. I thought you meant me personally.
Well, no, I mean, I'm putting it in their shoes. Remember, information in the system, the dark, if you want to call it, the people that call it the dark government. There are people that, of course, don't get elected and they're in the job and they're there forever. But the information does not come down; it always goes up. And that was a very specific when I was briefly with the government, and they were excruciatingly adamant about not communicating anything down. Everything has to go up, 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 and then you never got to hear what your work turned out. And I imagine it's pretty depressing for those people who do work, who do not have the clearance.
Oh, totally.
But as long as, I guess, if they're getting a decent enough paycheck. I really believe that given any situation, if you're standing in front of an extraterrestrial, the rules of the road and behavior in planet Earth go probably out the window.
Oh, yeah.
And it becomes self-preservation regardless. Because, I mean, when you're standing in front of an alien, your brain is going on left and right, back and forth, because it says, this is real, no, this isn't. This is real, no, this isn't. This is real, no, this isn't. This isn't real, no, this is. And I experienced that on a few occasions because, as I've said before, I've met 3 races face to face, and it messes with you really bad. And everybody says, "Oh, I wish you would take me with you." You don't want that. You don't want to walk away from everything you know, and it is not an easy thing to deal with. It really screws with your head in ways you can't even imagine.
Paradigm shift, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it puts you to the point where you take a breath and then you literally sit there and go, oh my God, what am I going to do about this? Because it's catastrophic. This changes everything we know, everything we believe in. And where do you start? And then of course, you're standing there going, wait a minute, I've been fooled. And then this is where a lot of people that start jumping into some of the crazy conspiracy shit, because they go, well, I was so fooled. How come am I being fooled about everything else? And it's kind of like somebody, when a scammer scams a victim, and that victim knows he's been scammed and realizes all of a sudden he's out of money. He doesn't report the scammer because he's embarrassed. And that's why that crime continues to be gotten away with. Now, there's a lot of people who have met aliens and absolutely do not dare tell anyone. And then there's the people who say they met aliens, and a good portion of them I never believe, unfortunately, and I should be a little kinder. But it's hard. I even suffer from I don't believe you. And the major thing with this is it's so absurd for humans to believe that we are the only people out here. It's beyond arrogant. It's absolutely dumb. And I think people think that Earth is ours, and who's to say there hasn't been another race that grew up here in between that last 65 million years that we don't account for? And there's a lot of that, and we find these little bones, and, they find skeletons of these fairy creatures. They got skeletons with wings, and they're embedded in rock, and they find this shit in Australia all the time. And it's like there's so many sightings and so many occurrences of them. How can we discount it? So there's so much more going on. But then you have to be very careful not to jump into the conspiracy theory crap, like the Q, who I dare not even hardly even mention because of how far that's dragging the science world down the toilet. And I've recently studied them and a whole bunch of other topics, including the economies of our world economies and our climate and this and that and the other thing. And geologic, and of course, it's the big warning of we're already seeing the changes in geological events. So I'm telling people we're going to have a funky year next year. And it's going to be spooky. And, of course, I have been, I can ask you, how accurate have I been?
On the state of the world, it's definitely getting worse.
Yeah, on the weather changes, et cetera. I look back at some of our older shows from 21 and early 22 and 2000, and my predictions were absolutely accurate. Were exactly what I see coming. And, of course, I know background information, plus I do my homework. So, and what's going to happen in 2025 when that audit from the Federal Gold Reserve comes to play? And because all the other countries that had their money sitting in New York City in 9/11 want to get their gold back. And the U.S. government told them, of course, we have to do our audit, and that will take until 2025. So you'll have to wait. And what happens when 2025 hits? And that stuff's not there, or it's, bricks painted with gold paint. Who knows?
Well, they're already saying that we've borrowed on it multiple times and the gold isn't actually there.
All right, but all the other gold countries were put at the United Nations or the World Trade Center. They had Building 7 was a gold repository where they took all the gold out of Fort Knox and moved it there. And people that still don't even know that. And then, of course, all I have to do is look up at the destruction of Building 7 versus the timing versus the falling of the other buildings, et cetera, et cetera. You look into this and, excuse me, but something's wrong here. And, that's as far as I want to go into that because, we've spent a great deal of money and a whole way of life that's completely changed everything we have to do in our world according to the Bush era. And the money that we've thrown to this is scary. Money from fear. God, if we would have actually done infrastructures and replaced some of our water systems and maybe paid for kindergarten and school lunches, look where we'd be today instead of throwing billions of dollars to screening machines and TSA and all this other crazy stuff that they're just bending us over backwards to stop some guy that has exploding shoes. We've wasted our efforts out of fear in so many ways, and I really wish that this information would just be released. And I drastically believe that they're not releasing it because they fear, look how some people are taking certain things and going absolutely crazy over them, even though they're not true. Oh. And we're seeing extremists. January 6th is an example. We're seeing extreme behavior. Now, a great deal of this could be planetary. Atu's moon has been affecting our brains for since 2019-ish. And now Saturn's yellow moon is so over the top of us and huge. I truly believe it has a connection to do with the fact that, like, these animals are walking in circles all over the planet, and it's weird. And everybody's getting a capture of it. And there was just announced recently that over 50 million birds have died. So, there's some things going on here that people need to start connecting the dots and putting together. It's not just weather. It's not just sun. It's not just heat. It's not just, this or that country doing this and that. We're all on this big ride here, and I think they're trying to distract us from a lot of this.